We're joined by immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bhangal. Harjap, how many times more are we going to have to discuss just people losing their lives in this dreadful way, drowning in a freezing cold channel? It's absolutely heartbreaking. It's unbearable. And of course, Rishi Sunak said he was going to stop it.
Well, I think the answer to that is probably a lot more until the gangs are caught and stopped. I mean, essentially, from what we can take from Oliver's information there, was that it's not the Rwanda policy that is sort of deterring. If anything, the deterrent is the weather, that and also the fact that money invested to try and catch the gangs means that operations are moving a little more south, and that the gangs are getting more sophisticated. But once again, it does show us that the gangs are 20 steps ahead of any government, be it the French government, be it the English government, in this operation. And until more money is pumped in and more patrolling is done and more action is taken once these gangs are caught, then there's not going to be a deterrent. There's a backlog waiting up, and I'm sure the gangs are already happy about that. Until these gangs are caught, rightly, as Keir Starmer says. Now, whatever we think about Keir Starmer and Labour's immigration policy, Labour do have a pretty good record on immigration compared to the Conservatives. Labour have managed to send back in a year 60,000 people, whereas the Conservatives are not even half that amount. And even recently, last year, it was hardly even a third of that amount that were being sent back. So Labour does have a better thing. Keir Starmer is a person who's worked as a barrister. He's worked on immigration cases. He knows that the root of this problem is the gangs. And we've said it a lot, many times here. Who is making money out of this? It's the gangs. And the gangs don't care what happens to a migrant when they get to the UK. Their job is to put someone on a boat and make sure that that person just lands here. And that's it. And regardless of who does
it's all very well to say, we commend Keir Starmer for saying target the gangs. But it's a very, very easy thing to say, and it's a pretty obvious thing to say as well. It's very easy, it's very obvious. It gets you points with somebody like you for saying the right thing, not the wrong thing. The only question is, of course, and the overwhelming question is, how do you do it? Where are they? How do you find them? How do you stop the chain? How do you target them? I remember that guy that was prosecuted. They found it. Didn't the whole thing come from Belgium, the case? And he seemed as if he was, I don't know, selling kebabs or belts or shoes or something. And really, he was providing these dinghies in which people were losing their lives crossing the channel. That was a very sort of complicated operation that was going on in terms of delivering these canoes to warehouses in Germany or something. It wasn't just you find a gang and stop it, wasn't it? It was much more difficult than that.
Well, I think the takeaway from that also is when they found him and they prosecuted, what happened to him? He got 8 years. He'll probably be out in 4. So, I mean, that's quite profitable for him if you have a look at it. So, if anything, that's going to encourage someone to say, well, he's made multi-millions, he spent 4 years inside and he'll be out to enjoy that. And he'll have done his time for that. Whereas if they'd given him life and no access to them funds at all, then I'm sure that would have been a different take on it. But the gangs are the same way you catch drug dealers. How do we catch drug gangs? How are we doing a war on gangs there? How do we catch international terrorists who are holed up in Pakistan like Osama bin Laden or Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein? Yet we can't catch a gang that operates on our borders in plain daylight in front of us from the same coast, as Oliver said, for the past 30 years. Yeah. That's almost like, and I've said this before in your show, Vanessa, us trying to trace a bus driver who takes bus passengers from A to B for the past 20 years using the same bus. Yep. And when we say, can we have some information on him, please? And the government goes, sorry, he's 20 steps ahead of us. We haven't got the intel. Of course we can catch these gangs. There's more money made in people smuggling than there is in drug smuggling. However, we have to look at the extent of the operation. There must be other elements involved in this. It's not just someone who's operating on their own. There must be even possibly government personnel involved on it, possibly even police, possibly even staff. We know that when these gangs operate, they have multiple people on the payroll. You cannot get from Russia by foot to France without being stopped once. I couldn't do it. You couldn't do it without being stopped to ask for paperwork. So how are the migrants and the gangs doing it? That's how sophisticated the gangs are. And this has got to be done with European cooperation. And this is not going to happen by Britain just throwing money at the situation. This is going to be a Europe-wide cooperation with other countries to say, well, hold on, let's pool our resources together. Let's catch these gangs. We know who they are. We know where they operate. Let's catch them and let's give them some serious time. And let's make sure that they are deterred and they do not benefit from the proceeds of a crime, because that's what it is essentially. It's a crime to smuggle people. And yet this crime seems to be so profitable and makes so much more money, more than selling drugs on the street, which we know is vast. So in the same way that we declare war on drugs, and we see that in many countries, even America does it, why can't we declare war on people smugglers, as opposed to say, well, actually, we're going to try and lock up all of the people who come here on a boat and send them to Rwanda, when we haven't got the resources. Rwanda is not cooperating. Rwanda doesn't want to take on this many people, hasn't got the spaces, and it's going to cost us about 200,000 per person out of our pocket, the taxpayers' money.
Harjap, I'm going to stop you there, but I thank you very much indeed. Thank you so much. Always bringing a very informed perspective on this. Let me bring into the conversation, though, Conservative MP Nickie Aiken. Nickie, thank you for joining me. You hear what Harjap has to say. You hear that we've lost another 5 people have died in the Channel, even though we've seen all those posters saying stop the boats, stop the small boats. We've heard a promise about stopping the boats. We've heard umpteen speeches by everyone from Suella Braverman to the Prime Minister about stopping the boats. What's your idea about what ought to happen now? Because this can't go on, can it?
Well, that's what the Rwanda safety bill is all about. It's about having many different policies and operations within our toolbox to ensure that we do stop illegal immigration. I think the Prime Minister and the government have been very clear on this. And we have seen a dramatic drop in the number of boats that have been making their way over the Channel over the last few months, due to having agreements with the likes of Albania and now other countries that I know the immigration ministers are looking at signing. So, look, I think the Rwanda safety bill is very much about offering another deterrent, to send a very clear message to people who want to risk their lives. And as you say, Vanessa, we saw 5 people die in horrendous circumstances yesterday. And the gangs are not going to stop pressurizing people to get into their boats unless we send a very clear message that if you do come here in a small boat, you will be seen as arriving here illegally, and you will be possibly sent to Rwanda. I think it's very much part of the deterrent that we've got to offer.
And what do you think is going to happen at the vote tomorrow? Because it's a hard sell, isn't it, now? Because it's been so expensive. It's been the dampest of possible squibs so far. Not one single person has actually gone to Rwanda or been flown to Rwanda. And the front page story in the Independent newspaper today is that 6 people from Rwanda have been given asylum in this country, indicating, you would think pretty conclusively, that Rwanda is not a safe place, is not a safe place to go. And that's why the courts found that we couldn't be shipping people out to Rwanda or indeed flying them out there. So it's not a good look, is it? It's not going to be an easy sell.
The United Nations have been sending refugees to Rwanda for several years now. And we saw recently reports of Afghan girls and women being sent to Rwanda to escape the Taliban. So look, the whole point of this bill tomorrow night, which I, as a One Nation Conservative, we are supporting this bill at second read. We did support it at second reading, and as long as there are no amendments, we think the bill goes far enough. The Rwandan government, our partners in this policy, have made it very clear that if the bill changes and we do start to consider breaking international agreements, then they will drop out of our agreement with them. So it's very, very important to make that point, that this is a very strong bill. It's part of a wider group of policies and operations that are preventing illegal immigration, which is beginning to work. And we have to take this forward. We have to have a deterrent.
And Nickie, you will have seen, I'm sure, all the coverage today about, I mean, what are they calling it? An absolute Tory wipeout, complete annihilation in the offing, you know, embarrassment, the like of which the Tory body hasn't seen for years and years, actual decades. It can't be pleasant reading for you, this prediction.
Vanessa, polls come and go. This is 14,000 people out of an electorate of, what, 30 million? And I think it's very important to remember that this this polling was done before the debacle that is Sir Ed Davey and the Post Office. It was done before the Rwanda bill is going through Parliament, and that I am convinced it will get through Parliament, and that it will then start to work. So look, the Prime Minister has made it very clear that the election is likely to be in the second half of the year, which probably means November. That's another 10 months away. You and I have been involved in politics a long time, probably too long for us really to want to admit to that. A week is a long time in politics. 10 months is a lifetime, and I think the stronger the economy grows, and I honestly think this election will be about the economy. It's so important that we talk about growth in the economy, jobs, high-skilled jobs, and that we talk about education and apprenticeships and decent education for our children, that I do think that people will start to understand that Keir Starmer and his socialist MPs, and we are looking at a socialist government. Let's not pretend that it's anything but. Tony Blair 25 years ago was a social democrat. He was never a socialist. This Labour Party is very much a socialist party, and we know that socialism never works for an economy.
Nickie, thank you very much indeed for joining us.